When I was 19, I was a babysitter for 3 young boys across town from me. They were 4, 6, and 9. I'll just call them Joe, 4, Curtis, 6, and Brian, 9. Joe and Brian weren't usually a problem. Joe was a surprisingly well-behaved toddler, and Brian just liked to play his video games at PlayStation. Curtis, on the other hand, was very moody, a picky eater, and difficult to get to go to sleep. I had worked for this family for like 1 year, and I was somewhat close with their mom, Linda, who was raising them by herself. Linda and her children lived in a decent house, which she inherited after the death of her father. All 3 boys had their own rooms. Linda worked nights at the time, so I'd always babysit till around midnight on weeknights, and my college classes would start in the afternoon. So it worked out schedule and sleep-wise. One night after playing some Mortal Kombat with Brian, I put Joey to bed, and not long after, Curtis. After tucking Curtis in, I started telling Brian to start changing into his PJs after his next fight was over. Brian insisted I play one more game of MK with him, so I made a deal that he'd go to bed after, if I did. During our game, though, Curtis started crying for me up from his room. I paused the game and went upstairs. As I entered his room, he said, "There's someone in his closet." I laughed, and I believe I pinched his cheek and said something along the lines of, "There's no such thing as monsters, but I'll leave the door open so you feel safer. Even if someone could be inside, it is most likely an animal, like a beaver or some other rodent." In any case, I told him there was no reason to worry. So I went back to the game of Mortal Kombat, and we resumed, and we eventually finished the battle with no interruptions. At this point, Brian went upstairs to change into his PJs and brush his teeth, and I was alone in the kitchen watching TV. That's when Curtis' cries from upstairs echoed down again. I went up to his room again, and he was hiding under his covers. He said once again, "There's a monster in the closet." I heard it. I looked at the closet door, which was closed. I asked him if he wanted me to take a look, and he shook his head no. I walked closer to the closet anyway, and he said don't. I didn't take him seriously, till I heard something in the closet myself. It was very clearly the sound of something alive in that closet that tapped into the door, or something behind the door. I turned around and picked up Curtis and said, "We're going to another room." I also grabbed Brian from the bathroom and brought him into Joe's room, where I locked the door. I went into the bathroom and called Linda and quietly asked if there was a possibility of there being an animal in the house or in the walls, because there were sounds that Curtis was hearing that I heard myself. She sounded concerned right away and wanted me to check the closet. I kept her on the phone as I went back to Curtis' room. My discovering the closet door to now be ajar confirmed that there was someone in the house with us. I told Linda, and she freaked out. She thought her older brother might be in the house. She told me that her brother had mental health problems for a very long time. No one had heard from him for 2 years, but before that they had serious disagreements about the legacy from their father. Linda received the house completely, since her brother Ron was then undergoing treatment at the clinic and was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, manic-depressive disorder, and the initial stages of schizophrenia. He had already entered the house in a similar manner. With these words, I was struck with paralyzing fear from the realization that there was a real psycho in the house with me and Linda's 3 children. I didn't know what to expect from him, but I heard the front door slam. I peeked down into the living room, and there was no one there, but the front door was shut. He must have made an exit while he could. I went to lock the door, then called 911. Linda came home from work early and was there when the police came. Without cameras or anything, there was no proof that it was her crazy brother, though. Linda told us that for a couple of years, she thought it was all over, that he wouldn't bother them anymore. The problem is that such patients cannot be constantly controlled. There was always a lack of evidence for a serious crime case, and after a course of treatment in a mental hospital, he was released again. She tried to reassure me that Ron was actually a harmless guy, and his antics were just a figment of his fevered mind, but I couldn't work for this family anymore. She understood I wouldn't feel comfortable staying in that house for a while after that, So she started letting the kids stay with a relative or one of her parents coming to watch the kids. The police recommended changing the locks on the doors and such to Linda. I don't know what happened after that because we kind of fell out of contact. I didn't really like the fact that she was okay with me checking the closet when she was already suspicious that it was her crazy brother. I was 15 years old then. Every summer I found a part-time job to earn some money. It was 2007. My father then sent me to work as a caregiver for his friend, who had a young son who required care, often when the parents wanted to spend time together. I really got along with his family right away. Their son Sam was a very funny child, but it was always easy and even fun to be with him. He was only 6, but he already knew the language perfectly and counted very well. Sam was a very creative person. His mother said that from a very early age they saw in him a craving for art, especially music. Sam really loved to sing. In the evenings he could draw with the same joy. Mostly he painted trees, forests, and the view from his window. At our first meeting, Sam's parents told me that the boy could invent various stories related to the singing of some monster outside the window, and that I should not pay attention to these tales. One evening, Sam actually drew something that looked like a howling ghost in the middle of the trees. Then I asked him who he drew. He replied that this is a singing monster. He often comes to visit him through the window, and he is very scary. Then I remembered what his parents told me, and I realized that this was all really a figment of his creative imagination. I thought so until one particular night that July 2007. Sam's parents went on a date, and we played the PlayStation, watched TV. Sam drew cows. It was a humid, rainy night. Sam started passing out before 10 o'clock at night, which meant getting him to sleep wouldn't be a problem. About an hour and a half had passed. It was now 11 p.m. I heard Sam groggily but loudly yell for me. I rushed up to him and asked what was the matter. He told me he heard the tapping noise again. I instantly felt uneasy and nervous, but I just flicked on the light and looked out the window. Nothing outside except darkness and the solar lights from the neighbor's driveway. I calmly told Sam that it was probably just some bugs or raindrops since it's summer after all. Then he said that he heard some singing sounds also. As he said that, I heard a faint tap noise against his window, and somebody yelled, "Samie, come out and play." In fact, I was in a wild panic inside, but I didn't show it to Sam, who, surprisingly, seemed quite calm. I realized then that he knew more than me about what was happening here, and he, as if introducing me to his monster, said, "You see?" I got the chills as I flicked on the light again and looked out the window. And again, nothing. I told Sam not to worry as I opened the window and yelled out, "This is private property. I'm going to call the police." Moments after I did so, I heard a frantic scurrying into the forest that was across the yard. By now I must have had goosebumps all along my arms and legs, and I immediately called the police. I called the parents right after, and they were thankfully already on their way home. The police arrived and didn't seem at all surprised by what I had told them. They had gotten other reports in the area for quite some time about some stranger going up to people's windows at night, looking through them and tapping on them. But no one told them about any sort of singing. They said they got calls telling them the same thing almost every week. Sam's parents just never believed him, and I guess took it as some little kid's story or imagination, but it turned out to be very real. They searched the whole neighborhood and never found the person. After that night, I told the family in the nicest way possible that I didn't feel comfortable watching their kids anymore, and I still think to this day what would have happened if anything went differently. Like, God forbid the window was unlocked or open. However, whoever was there knew Sam's name. This no longer looks like the usual prank of local hooligans or the whims of a city madman. Their child may indeed still be in serious danger. This happened when I was 7 years old, and my little sister was 5. It's a memory that's kind of scarring, to the point that I just remember it so vividly even as an adult, and it's something that stayed with me. Our parents hired a one-time babysitter for this weekend, that they'd be away on a couple's trip. It was a 15-year-old boy that responded to an ad that my mom posted in the public library. He happened to go to the high school that my parents went to, so I feel like they felt a safer connection with him. He was watching us for 3 nights from Thursday to Sunday. His name was Amir. My father gave me a new Sega Dreamcast, and I spent all my free time playing Shenmue. I could forget about everything in the world while playing this game. I was always interested in martial arts, and my father planned to enroll me in the local karate section. Since the main character of the game was a karateka himself, it was always impossible to drag me away from the console. This was the case on the first night with Amir. I played, and I guess he came down to build a rapport with me and asked to play with me. There is no multiplayer mode in this game, so we took turns playing with it. From what I remember, I actually was having fun and started to like Amir. The next morning, I noticed Amir taking money from my parents' box, which I personally was not allowed to touch. Noticing that I noticed him, Amir said that my parents left him this money for food, and he was going to order us some pizza. My feelings told me that something was wrong with it. I didn't feel like Amir could be trusted. I thought that I was now obliged to watch his every move. That day I even enjoyed it. It was like I turned it all into a game. But the day passed quietly. We ate pizza, played catch in the backyard, and my sister drew airplanes. For some reason, she always drew only airplanes. For a 5-year-old girl, it was a little strange. I spent the evening playing my favorite game again. By nightfall, I had already forgotten about my suspicions. Amir put my sister to bed, and I also went to bed. I always was a heavy sleeper as a kid, and waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a regular occurrence. That night was the case. I remember flipping on my side after hearing my door closing. I looked across the room towards the door, and as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw someone standing in the corner of the room, and before I could digest what was happening and scream or react in any way, I heard Amir go, "Shh, it's all right. It's me." I didn't respond, but then he slowly got closer to my bed, pulled the covers off of me, and I swear he was about to get in the bed before I screamed stop or something along those lines, and he froze. I got out of bed and left the room. I went to my little sister's room, took a blanket from under her bed, and laid on the floor shaking, feeling extremely confused and uncomfortable. My thoughts were filled with doubts about my own suspicions. I thought I might have misunderstood something. However, this disgusting feeling did not leave me the entire next day. Amir was avoiding me all day long. I couldn't exactly call my parents because I didn't know either of their cell phone numbers. It was a weird long day of me staying in my room and playing games with my little sister. That night, I couldn't sleep for obvious reasons, and I don't know how much time passed before hearing my door creak open again. This time, I didn't look up. I laid there until I heard the door close, and then a few moments of silence later, I looked up to the door, but he wasn't there this time. I turned on the lamp to confirm this, but even at 7, I knew he was creeping around again, and I wanted to go to sleep in my sister's room to protect her in my mind. I got up and took my pillows and blanket to my sister's room. Amir was already halfway towards my sister's bed in the pitch-black room. I yelled at him to get away from her, and he told me to calm down. He's just checking on her. I again found myself feeling like I might be wrong, like he was really not doing anything wrong, but wanted to check her for real. But once I made this decision that I would protect my sister from him, these doubts were quickly dispelled. There was no time for them. He hurried out of the room, and I locked the door. That was the last time I ever saw him. The next morning, I woke up on my sister's room and told her let's play games in her room until Mom and Dad get back, which was early in the day, thank God. We heard our parents get home and talk with Amir outside, but we didn't leave her room until he was gone. My parents asked me why I slept on her floor. I don't remember what I said, but I know I didn't tell them the real reason. It later turned out that Amir actually stole that money from the box. Then the father also noticed that his watch was missing from the closet. He inherited this clock from his father. It occupied a place of honor in a glass cabinet in the living room,